This is a memorandum in support of legislation directed to the members of the town board. It's prepared by me. It starts off with problem identification. The intent of the New Hartford Nuisance Abatement Law is to prevent the degradation of homes and neighborhoods in the town of New Hartford by holding property owners and residents accountable for individuals residing in homes where nuisances are occurring. Nuisance conditions can drive down adjacent property values and have a domino effect on the property conditions in the entire neighborhood. Municipalities have recognized that these conditions are frequently the precursor to more serious problems that can inhibit a community's economic vitality. New Hartford has a significant older housing stock, and many of these older homes have been divided up into apartments. In many cases, the property owner does not live in the house and may not even be aware of the recurring violations of the law. New Hartford also has several mobile home parks where the mobile home is rented out. A significant amount of unlawful activity is occurring in residences where the property owner is not present and may not even be aware of the nuisance conduct by those residing at the property. After several years of noticing an increasing amount of nuisance crimes at rental properties, I requested that the town board authorize the formation of a nuisance abatement committee, otherwise known as the Property Maintenance Task Force. For the past 2 years, members of the task force examined the scope of the problem, reviewed existing laws, and examined current nuisance abatement laws in other communities. It was determined that the best course of action would be to recommend to the town board the enactment of our own nuisance abatement law. To that end, the committee, with the assistance of the town attorney, worked on several drafts of the law, finally settling on the draft before you. There was a significant effort on behalf of the task force to ensure that the law would be fair, provide for due process, and hold up to judicial review. The New Hartford Nuisance Abatement Law represents a community-based strategy involving a comprehensive, multi-agency approach to nuisance property. This strategy includes 3 basic components: law enforcement, prevention and deterrence, and intervention. 4 fundamental principles underlie the New Hartford Nuisance Abatement Strategy: collaboration, coordination, community participation, and leveraging of resources. In addition to units of government, the nuisance abatement law seeks to partner with property owners in dealing with problem residents or tenants. The law includes a formal property owner notification procedure to make sure the owner is aware of any problems. Due process is provided at several stages in the law, wherein property owners are provided with a hearing should the nuisance not be properly addressed. This hearing allows for a free exchange of information between the property owner and town official in an effort to work together to mitigate the problem. Eventually, if the designated nuisances are not resolved, the law provides for a remedy in state Supreme Court, another step in procedural due process. I believe that the proposed New Hartford Nuisance Abatement Law is an example of proactive as well as reactive government. The real benefit of the ordinance lies in its deterrence value. If property owners perceive that there will be a cost to them for allowing continued aberrant behavior, they are more likely to move towards correcting that behavior before it comes to the attention of local government. Essentially, the ordinance will provide, I hope, for property owners who will be stakeholders in their own neighborhood, and therein lies the real purpose of the ordinance. It is important to remember that the nuisance abatement law can also be an important tool for the property owner who may be seeking solutions for problem residents or tenants. It provides them with a means to partner with local government in the courts to correct a problem that they might have difficulty dealing with on their own. I would respectfully request the town board give due consideration to the proposed ordinance and provide us with the tools necessary to keep our neighborhoods safe and ensure continued quality of life for our residents.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up to public input or questions of Ray or any of us on this new law. This is, of course, Ray, this has been going, this study into this goes back for about 2 years now?
That is correct, 2006.
Yes. And you've talked to various communities that already have it.
So we've talked to them, we've obtained copies of their ordinances, we've done some site visits, met with other communities and their council who have nuisance abatement laws and are using them effectively. even communities we found in our research much smaller than Hartford, the town of Shenango has a nuisance abatement law. Clearly towns of similar size and larger towns like Colony also have nuisance abatement laws.
Thank you. Any comments, input on this? Yes.
Dave Valentine, 30 Pearl Street in Hartford. We have had a problem for 1.5 years with nuisance of rental property where loud parties going on. Some of them start 2 o'clock in the morning, go to dawn, and barking dog, bonfires, leaking gasoline tanks where we had to have the fire department come because my garage was filling with gas fumes from the vehicle being parked next to it. And the police had responded. The last incident was, I think, 5 or 6 squad cars showed up. They tracked down a stolen car out of Newburgh that ended up at the residence. And I'm most highly favorable to this. We've got a nice residential area. I've been a resident at this location for 40 years, and the neighborhood has been very stable. But if you allow this type of property to fall into disrepair, it devalues the properties of the rest of the neighborhood and so on. So I wholeheartedly encourage you to support this.
Thank you, Dave. Chief, any comments on that? I mean, this would be a classic example?
This would be a classic example. It's occurring much more than it used to be, because like I alluded to, a lot of our older homes in the last decade have been divided up into rental properties. And many of those properties have absentee landlords. And just to be fair to the landlords, they may not even know that they're having problems at their properties. That's why the nuisance abatement law was written, so there's a formal notification process. So, and I've talked to some landlords, and so some other members of our committee, and when they're fully aware of the law, they can see that it can actually benefit them, not only to notify them, but to help them deal with problem tenants. It's not easy. Anybody that's a landlord here and owns rental property knows that it is not all that easy with our tenant laws to evict a tenant inconsistent with the lease. And this may very well be of assistance to the tenant who is trying to evict, or would be of value to the landlord who's trying to evict the problem tenant.
Chief, could you maybe give us a scenario, perhaps, how something might start with a noise complaint and then something much more serious involving a felony or something?
Yeah.
Give us a scenario on how this would flow.
Okay. Obviously, under the law, there could be thousands of ways and different incidents could occur. But I thought I would talk about a situation that occurred several times in the town in the last year, having to do with sale of unlawful drugs, having to be marijuana. A number of cases, probably 6 or 7, the United County Drug Task Force and my staff dealt with sale of marijuanas out of rental properties in the town. This type of behavior can often lead to other disorderly type behaviors and even more violent behaviors. So a scenario might be that there's a renter who is selling marijuana out of a rental property. The police do an investigation. Usually they're pretty long and protracted. They get the search warrants from usually a county court judge, and they execute the search warrants and make the arrest. At that stage, the person goes, the arrestee goes into the criminal court system, and the landlord, especially if they don't reside in the immediate area, or maybe they don't read the paper or whatever, they may not even know that there was drug dealing at that house, allegedly, and that there had been arrests there and search warrants executed. So we would initiate, after that scenario, we would initiate a formal notification process. It would be in writing, either personal delivery or certified mail, that this incident occurred on the property. We, at that point, can make a decision whether to petition the person in before the hearing board, which is articulated in the legislation, And at that hearing board, we can hear evidence in the civil proceeding as to what occurred there, and also hear evidence from the landlord should he wish to present some. Then the hearing board could make a recommendation to the town board and to the tenant, and to the homeowner about what we'd like to see done to correct the problem at this particular. It could be we need to evict or move to evict the residents. We could probably instruct them that they need to do a more comprehensive background search on their tenants before they lease to them. Or we can, if they don't agree with that, we can move on with a recommendation of the town board for even more stricter penalties against the landlord. I don't see that happening like the first time there's an incident. I see the landlord saying, oh my gosh, this is happening on my property. What can I do to correct it? Thank you for advising me of the situation and providing me with perhaps some alternatives to mitigate that problem, like say eviction.
But they're formally notified of an issue.
Yes.
And basically, it would be up to them. They might initiate action without any further action on the board's part, or the police department's part, or anyone else.
Absolutely.
But now they've been notified of an issue.
They've been notified, and if they do go before the hearing board and we hear evidence on the alleged violations of the law, usually there are more than one, we can make recommendations to them as part of the hearing board and pass them on to the town board. And like I said, the recommendation can be as simple as, if you need to, we'd like to see you
Be more careful.
be more careful, or move to evict the current tenants that have caused the problem, in this case, drug dealing in the first place. The problem with drug dealing, I'll tell you, quite frankly, is it seldom stops at drug dealing. When drug dealing occurs at a particular residence, what happens is violence soon follows into drug dealing. You have drug ripoffs, you have territory issues between drug dealers, and then you start having the violence, the robberies of the drug houses, and God forbid the shootings and whatever. So what can start off as a little marijuana dealing, and once it becomes known that there's a lot of money in that house for drugs, it's quite often can lead to drug ripoffs or ripoffs of the money. So once again, drug dealers, even what we refer to as minor drugs like marijuana, can often lead to violence. And once again, I just use that example because we had several of those this past year. But we can deal with continued nuisance parties.
I think that's another,
Yes.
the extremes that we know of, but simpler stuff.
Yes.
Nuisance parties.
Here's what happens typically. Every weekend there's a party at this house. There's a nuisance, meets the definition of the nuisance abatement law. We go there. Traditionally what you do is you knock on the door and say, look, we got a complaint, you got to quiet down, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. If they don't quiet down, we come back and we make an arrest for disorderly conduct, which is a violation under the New York State penal law. It has the same weight of a traffic ticket. So they get arrested. We do our job to the extent we can. But maybe 2 weeks later, they have another loud party. They have another party or disorderly gathering at the property at 1 o'clock. We can only do so much under the criminal laws. The nuisance abatement law actually can bring them in, but more importantly, can bring the rental property, bring the landlord into the mix to say, here's what's going on. You need to do something about it. You need to be a stakeholder and a partner in this community. And if they need the eviction or just corrective behavior or a warning from the landlord, every case is going to be different.
Yes, sir.
I'm Frank Whittington, Marshal's Office, Utica, New York. We're part of the nuisance abatement team in Utica, and it's the mayor's office that calls us when the landlord's been contacted through the nuisance abatement law that you speak of. The landlords call us to prepare and serve the papers on the people to throw them out. We also can help them help you to see if you can find some better tenants. We have records showing what tenants have been brought to court in the past regarding situations like this. But we've come tonight just to lend a hand in that. I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you very much.
So that data would be available to a landlord?
Correct.
Thank you.
There's a lot of also, you make up a good point, there's a lot of commercial services that might cost a few dollars that you can actually investigate your prospective tenants. And we probably would want to encourage that behavior, or maybe the hearing board could demand that type of behavior or that type of practice with our landlords. I think it's a great investment or a great process that any landlord should engage in, is to investigate their tenants. And I don't mean a criminal investigation, although it could include that. I mean past financial problems, past tenant problems, being evicted, other civil issues with this particular person.
Actually,
Whether they paid a NIMO bill or National Grid bill and all those things, it's a pretty good indication that they're probably not going to pay their rent. And the landlord might say, well, I'm deciding not to rent to this person. So, those are great suggestions.
In addition to that, there's Utica landlords have formed a sort of a coalition that meets once a month at City Hall there. And I know that a lot of the tenants that you're probably having problems with in New Hartford are coming from Utica. They meet there and they give a list of all the tenants that have been evicted for free every month. The next meeting is the 25th at City Hall. It's 6:30, I believe, in Utica. But if you go, you can pick up a list for free, and it'll show you all of the tenants for the last 6 or 8 months, maybe, that have been evicted for various reasons, have been brought to court with a petition.
I might add, Utica is one of the nuisance abatement law we looked at, as well as the city of Rome. Both cities have done a great job in dealing with their problems. I'm sure that 10 years from now, you'll look back and say, because your nuisance abatements are relatively new, like
Correct, yes.
5 years, I think.
Yes.
Thank God we've had it. What condition would we be in now if we didn't enact it 10 years ago? Right?
You'd be renting to the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
I appreciate your input, and that's a good cooperative measure. Use that. I notice I'm a runner, so I run through West Utica, how that's changed so dramatically from ethnic neighborhoods now to mostly rental properties, and so it's interesting. But there's a lot of action, unfortunately, in this year.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody, we have a large older housing stock. I think a lot of people who don't live here think everybody in Hartford lives in a new home, but we've got a large older housing stock. We don't have large families anymore. These homes have been bought up and divided. We've got several trailer parks or mobile home parks where the trailers are being rented out. And some, quite frankly, some of the people living in these particular places are, oh, shall we say, problems.
Do we have any more comments, folks? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Mary Strolsky, 37 Slaughter Ave. The first thing I want to say is that it's a long time in coming, and I hope it comes soon. We have 2 such properties across. One is on the corner of Esmeralda and 37 Slaughter Ave. And right now, that is more or less has become a flat house. There are at least 4 boys living in this house. Cars are parked directly in front of the house. They have their parties just about every Saturday night. The person who lives exactly across from them has cars in front of the house, side of the house, the noise keeps going on. Finally, she called the police, and the police came. It's a mixture. It's a party. Sunday morning, when you get up, there'll be a car parked on the corner of Esmeralda and Wilbur with a beer can on top, standing there. Another one directly in front of our house. Another one up above the plow. Thank heavens we haven't had all that heavy snow, but no way could it really plow the road the way that it should. And New Hartford always has plowed it beautifully. So we have these cars all over. Now the house directly across from us. Everybody knows at home. Everybody in New Hartford knows it. We had drug dealers living upstairs in both of these houses. We even had the FBI come into that house across from us. We had drugs buried in the bank of our creek.
I remember.
Do you remember that? Unbelievable. We've had, and this has been going on since the arterial went through and the town allowed this great big monstrosity of a house to be moved in there, following absolutely none of the laws. It's right about 10 feet off the road. It's a mess. But that's beside the point. That landlord lives in this area. And I think codes has had more to do with that one home than any other probably in the town of unless there are. They noticed these 2 homes well. twice we've had this reassessment of properties. Twice our property was supposed to be reassessed. When we went for the hearing, as soon as the people knew where we were living, we didn't even have to plead our case, because this has been going on and on. So I guess I'm setting up. But what I'm saying is there are two properties that are so well known for problems, and I can't tell you the people that it is on these ones.
Mary, we're gonna pass this law tonight, hopefully, and this will put some teeth into it, so that you should have it at your point in your life. I know you're probably going to church, and you have to see that beer on a Sunday morning.
Well,
You know, it's
it's
probably a little It's not a community well.
area was a very quiet.
That's
little
right, and
area.
that's why you had a classic example of what we should address, and hopefully at the end of this public input from folks, we're going to pass this law so that the chief and his folks will have the teeth in this law to address that situation, which is horrible.
And you just don't feel as if you're going to say anything to these people. You don't want to get involved with this. You're a little tired of calling up, complaining about it, but it's constant.
That's right. We hear you. Thank you very much, Mary. There's another gentleman.
Ross Sloan, 2 Woodland Road, former police commissioner, when my problem happened. But we had a house across the street, 2 families rented out to Eureka College students. And it was all women that were renting in there. And we had a constant traffic problem with boys coming in and terrific drinking problems. These guys would come in and take cases of beer out of the car every night. And they'd be all over the street in the morning. The noise was terrible. And Ray knows, because I was on the commission at that time. And he knows the problems I was having, because I was telling him that I would call him up to get somebody over to quiet him down. The way it was solved is that we went through Utica College. And Utica College put pressure on the landlord, who had to be a trustee there, I believe. And he got rid of them. But they trashed his house, too.
That's
So he's not ready to do those again. But it was a case that Ray was talking to me about the abatement law that you're talking about right now, and I think it's an excellent idea to eliminate that kind of problem.
Thank you, Ross. Gentleman right here.
Yes, sir. Roger Gatto, I live on Urban Ave, and I'm over there, I've been there for 10 years, I bought my mobile home back then, and the rest of them are rental properties, and since then, they've all deteriorated, not only the homes, but the people living there, and now the drug activity and everything is just, it's rampant, especially 2 mobile homes in particular. I've made numerous complaints, not only on the deteriorating homes, but of the activity, and it's just, and there's, it seems like the first 2 weeks of the month, especially when this goes on at night, and there's, like I say, the drugs, I know of one place where it's manufactured, and it's just ongoing, and I'm planning to move, but in the meantime, anybody else that goes there, it's just, now the new person that bought the property lives in Colorado. And then there's these wild basketball games, these mobile homes are close together, mine's on a corner lot. One gentleman had his windshield broken out by this one individual that persists, and there's 3 or 4 cars on the side of the road all the time with 10, 12, 14 people, and that's a nuisance with the ball, and it's constant every night. I don't know if that would be considered a nuisance, but to myself living there,
I think it is.
I mean, it's constant.
First of the month, huh? That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All hours of the night, you see these cars, this mobile home in particular is 2 down from me, and the cars in and out all hours of the night. I've seen it, you can hear the doors shut, and the parties are just terrible, open fires, constant.
Thank you, Roger. And so you're definitely in favor of it.
All out.
All right, good. Thank you. Ed?
Yes, I'm Edward Bradley, and I live at 25 Paris Road, just up the street here. The question I have is, what if the landlord, my landlord is an absentee landlord, however, he is aware of problems that are happening in one of the apartments in my house. Ray probably knows of some of the problems that have happened in my house. What happens then if the landlord is aware of it?
We still go through a formal notification process, and then we can call him in before the hearing board.
Because he actually, the last time that there was an issue, he actually came to me and said, kind of be aware that.
We would still formally notify them of the problem, so they can't say, I didn't know. Even though I suspect a lot of landlords know or suspect and just turn their heads as long as their monthly check comes. Maybe that's unfair, but
Yeah.
I suspect that's occurring.
Yeah.
They would still get a formal notification problem of a particular problem or a series of problems, and we would have them come before the hearing board, and we would hear evidence on the nuisance or nuisances. The nuisances, by the way, I made a bunch of copies, there's still some up on the deck, are clearly articulated right here in the law. So we would still be very formal with them, with whether they knew or not in terms of their knowledge.
So would a basketball, a big type game going on in close homes, would that be considered a nuisance?
It could. And here's how it becomes a nuisance. And it's subjective, not always objective. What's a nuisance at 2 o'clock in the morning is not a nuisance at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So once again, it's based on a reasonableness standard. Kids playing basketball at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is probably pretty acceptable to all of us, depending on the variables. But people playing basketball at 2 o'clock in the morning is not. And that may push it over into being a nuisance.
Okay, one more question on the known drug activity. If one was to report it, you gotta have proof and everything on
No.
this, or how would that work? I've never had
No.
the will to do it, but now I
In Oneida County, we're lucky. We have a Oneida. What occurred is the law enforcement agencies in Oneida County 10 or more years ago recognized the best way to fight the drug problem is multi-jurisdictions. We created a county drug task force under the district attorney's office. So even suspected drug activity, if you get it to the police department or directly to the task force, your local police department, whatever community you live in, you don't have to have probable cause, you don't have to give statements or anything like that. But if you give them enough information about what's going on, and they ask you to get some plate numbers if you're in the interview, they can open a case file and then do whatever they have to do. I've seen my people work on drug, assigned to the task, work on drug for 2 years to build a case. So sometimes it happens in 2 weeks, and sometimes it takes 2 years. It's all very specific, and it goes from surveillance and observation into perhaps wiretapping and into search warrants, and then the culmination of the arrest. So it's not always easy to build a drug case, but the bottom line is if you give the information to us that you suspect this type of activity, we will open a file.
Oh, really? So that all it takes is somebody to...
Yeah.
Right.
You can't just say, I got 2 young people living in that apartment next to me, and all young people do drugs, so therefore, there's no drugs. You can't make those type of assumptions and whatever, but if you give us some reasonable grounds to believe, we can direct you on what information you need. Then we can open a file. We've done it many times.
Well, the person stopped in at the...
Stop in or call.
There's confidentiality.
Absolutely.
That's always been a concern in the past.
Yeah, there's confidentiality, Roger, so that and we have, the drug task force is probably one of the most successful team efforts we use in Oneida County. It's
I do know,
done
no
great
offense,
things.
there are weapons in these 2 mobile homes where this has been going on.
We
I'm not worried about retribution.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and I think that Ray would know how to handle it.
As a landlord, to know exactly what we're supposed to be looking for. I don't want to be called in on something that,
Those
Those
refer to certain sections of our local ordinance. Chapter 56 happens to refer to dogs and pets. We have certain laws on the books regarding dogs. They actually mirror state laws.
And as a landlord, could that be provided to us?
Absolutely.
All of this that we need to know?
Absolutely.
Okay. And another thing, if, say something does happen in our property and we don't know about it and we're called to a hearing, is our name going to be used publicly in the papers?
Well,
Without,
we don't intend to make press releases on the nuisance abatement hearings or anything else, because a hearing is not so much an accusation against you. The hearing, the notification and the subsequent hearing is to bring you before the committee nuisance abatement hearing board or committee, we can present you with the issues at your property if you're a landlord, and then you can subsequently tell us what maybe you want to tell us we're wrong,
Right.
or present evidence on your own behalf, or say, well, geez, thank you for letting me know, and here's what I will do about it. We can
Right.
revisit the issue.
And it's good, and we can work with you, but I just, sometimes it just seems like, you know, we don't want to be the bad guys
Yeah.
completely either. You know, we need help too.
I-
So, and sometimes when you try to be very careful in selecting your tenants, and you ask for references, I mean, they can lie to you too, and they can tell you they're gonna be the most wonderful tenants, and you check their references, and sometimes they lie to you too, so we need tools.
Yes, that's why we decided to make this a civil proceeding and not a criminal one, like violation of the town law, so we're going to issue an appearance ticket, and you go tell it to a judge. We made this a civil proceeding. We built in a lot of due process. We wrote this law 5 or 6 times, Jerry rewrote it, to make sure due process is in here, fairness is in here, because our interests are in helping the landlord correct the problem, if it happens to be a landlord-tenant situation, correct the problem, not making life difficult for you.
So we can actually call, like, say, who would we call if we wanted to find out all this more information? Would that be available someplace?
You mean the actual sections of the law? You can
sections.
call my office, you can call the town clerk's office, you can call the code's office. All of us have the code books. We can photocopy any section out of it for you. Yeah, that's,
Give them the website address,
Give
they
them-
could access it.
you can access it from the website. Yeah.
Right.
You know, as a landlord, you should be commended for being here and asking the questions. I think that's wonderful. And
Not
it
all
shows that
tenants
you
are
want to be
local
involved.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Not all tenants are local tenants.
That's
People are
correct.
transient, they come from across the country.
That's right.
You might be renting someone from California.
Right.
And you can call and find out references, but who knows?
No, you're 100% correct.
Some leases, I call them leases, they are because they're verbal and they're month to month. Which I was kind of surprised at when I started to do research and talk to our judges regarding landlord and tenant cases they've had before them. There's a lot of tenants out there that there really isn't a lot of history on, and they go month to month, and there isn't a written lease, it's verbal, the verbal lease.
Christine, did you have something you want to say?
Yes, Chief, I had several calls on this, and most of them were agreeing to it. I did have a couple people though who were concerned, and actually they weren't landlords, they were single-family owners, homeowners. And they have a problem with some of their neighbors where their neighbors just complain about everything, you know. One gentleman said that, you know, he's retired, in the summertime he likes to go between his garage and his yard and be puttering around, and he plays his radio and his neighbor keeps calling off, you know. And, I mean, how do you think you can kind of address it from that stance?
Well, first of all, the nuisance has to rise to the level of the nuisance articulated right here in section 86.2. And I'm familiar with those type of situations, and they occur quite frequently where one neighbor doesn't like another neighbor, so they sort of use the government, i.e. the police or codes, as a method to get even with it. We deal with that currently now, and I think we deal with it. It has to rise to the level of the violation. Sometimes that's subjective, like I said, and not objective. That's where we rely on people like myself who was experienced with the law, the town attorney, to say, wait a minute, this doesn't rise to that level, and we're not going to take, and the nuisance abatement law doesn't apply. But you're absolutely right. We have to be very careful about not being utilized in that, the law or our resources being utilized in that fashion. It doesn't work.
I have a question. I am a landlord too, and sometimes some of these tenants who do come in with very good references, but once they're in, they turn around and you virtually can't get them out. And sometimes people don't see you're trying, you're taking them to court, you're doing what you're supposed to, but as a tenant, they seem to have a lot of the rights on their side once they're in. And some of these people, let's face it, they know how to get around and how to hang out in place as long as they can. Will you also be offering the landlord's assistance in helping to get these people out? Because sometimes we feel our hands are tied and judges let them stay.
To the extent the law allows, absolutely. And you noticed in my memorandum in support of legislation, I kind of addressed that a little bit. And here's an example you could do as a landlord. as part of your lease, you can put, must adhere to the provisions of the New Hartford Nuisance Abatement Law, section 7. Put that right in, and that's grounds to go to the court on an eviction hearing that they violated the tenant of the lease. And that's one of the things that was pointed out to me that I actually didn't look at originally, that could be very, very beneficial to a landlord. And this isn't what you have, this isn't once you have a problem tenant, this is all tenants. It should be right in your, you can even put this right in your lease. Therefore, once again, if they violate, if they become nuisances, you bring them to an eviction hearing in your local criminal court, in this case, we Hartford Town Court, violating the lease because you created a nuisance. The tenant created a nuisance. And I thought, my gosh, that's an innovative approach to using this law to write right in to a lease. And actually, an attorney suggested that to me, talking about. So I thought, my gosh, that's very positive for the landlord.
Thank you. If there are not any other comments, I'd like to call the meeting. Yes.
Earl,
Yes,
I gotta make a couple comments. They wrote a couple things down here. Randy Bolgar, 71 Cheryl Lane. My initial concern was what was in the law, but after I've read it, I think those concerns are no concerns anymore, and I can support it. I think it was said here, the trick is to find good tenants, you know, and we've all, I'm a landlord also. We've always had a lease, and we always do references, and something that we check now at work, there's 2 websites, and I don't have them with me, sexual offender registries that you should be checking too. You'd be surprised what's out there. So I would say that whoever's a landlord, you ought to be checking those things as well. I can support it, and I'm glad that Chief Filo, that you didn't include all the landlords in your initial comments.
I was very careful
in the same group.
Try to be fair.
Because I haven't had a problem with any of the tenants, but it's because we're careful on who we get in there. And I think that's the key.
That's the key, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Randy.
Oh, I'm for it.
Do you have any additional comments? If not, I will call the meeting closed.
Yes, I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
All in favor? Aye. Therefore, we can now vote on the law. Chief, I want to thank you so much, and Jerry, there's been a lot of work on this. This is not taken lightly.
Thank you. I was remiss in not recognizing that the Property Maintenance Task Force was created consistent with the recommendations of the Municipal Conference of Mayors. So we kind of had a template on how to proceed with this, and I'd like to thank the members of that task force. I'd like to especially thank Jerry Green, who worked innumerable hours on this, in drafts and redrafts and rewriting. Once again, just to make sure we had due process and the law was fair.
I think it's interesting for landlords that they can incorporate this in your lease, which I think is an excellent idea, Chief. That's a very good point to have. So I thank you again for this, and we're not out to punish landlords or anything, but I think it's just it's well needed, and we've obviously had some activity in certain areas in the town. So I think everyone's been presented. Rich, you've done a lot of work too. Thank you. And I think also the late J.C. Waskowitz was a big factor in this too. So if that being the case, then can we vote to...
I'll make the motion that we'll adopt the local law, public nuisance abatement law.
Made by Rich.
A second.
Second by Dave. All in favor? Aye. And passed. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us.